Dragon's Dogma 2 is high on the list of most anticipated games of 2024, and countless people are incredibly hyped for it. And so was I. Note the past tense. I watched promotional footage with moderate delight and for the most part was content, until I came across Warrior Vocation Spotlight. At this point you are probably wondering what the hell could I see in this video that perks my interest in the game, and you might come to the conclusion that I'm insane. You're not wrong. But besides being esoteric weirdo, I'm also a HEMA nerd, which grants me the curse of very specific knowledge, and therefore I notice and stress over details that most people unbeknownst to the subject wouldn't give a crap about, even if paid to. I am also just intelligent enough to forgive a Japanese company not being fluent in European history trivia, but on the other hand, making a game inspired by certain place and period would at least incentivize research about said place and period, especially in regards to things player will have on his screen for an entire playthrough, if not several. What is it then that I noticed? The player character is struggling to lift its own weapon. Look closely at this animation. You can see the effort needed to accelerate the blade, and once again the effort needed to pick it up from the ground. All surviving examples of greatswords, as well as accurate modern recreations, weighed between 2 and 4 kilos or between 4.5 and 9 pounds. A gallon of milk weighs 8.6 pounds. Imagine the pinnacle of human physique, struggling to lift a fucking gallon of milk with his both hands. And if you want to point out that this heap of junk looks slightly heavier than properly made Zweihander, then I have to ask you what mental gymnastics does it take to excuse magic and monsters, but strong people being strong enough to wield their own weapons properly is somehow stretching suspension of disbelief too far. I am not often on the side of realism in video games. After all, they are meant to be fun first and believable second. But when realistic greatsword fencing moves make the in-game ones look like a pathetic downgrade, then on what merit am I supposed to excuse the latter? This is how greatsword is handled properly. Notice the fluid continuous motion only stopping the blade when it is necessary. Greatsword combat is largely based around the idea of energy preservation and large circular motions, allowing trained fighter to deliver cuts faster and with more power by keeping the momentum going. Here on the other hand, we see players swing, go 3/4 through the spin and stop the blade there, instead of simply redirecting the momentum already present in moving weapon towards the creature. In fact, by stopping the blade there, player prevents the creature from being hit by the reverse edge, only to again put even more effort into accelerating blade in the opposite direction. Going almost full circle, stopping and doing the same cut in opposing direction effectively makes the wielder spend more energy to attack less frequently and with less force behind each attack than they would achieve by just bloody spinning in place. And if your weapon is indeed heavy, the last thing you want to do is to waste stamina constantly decelerating and accelerating your weapon when instead you could just do this. There are people doing nicer, smoother flurries recreationally, just for the hell of it, but our fantasy warrior in fantasy world couldn't even swing his fantasy sword like he knows which end to point towards the enemy. Thief can do this without coating his immediate surroundings with today's breakfast, but the big sword user using big sword in remotely proper manner somehow isn't possible. Once again, compare this to this. This is a trained swordsman. This is a peasant pulled away from the plow and forced into suit of armor, wielding a poorly made, poorly balanced greatsword for the first time in his bloody life. But of course, you couldn't maintain the proper sword fighting technique with a weapon that has a bloody 30-pound anvil mounted on top for no other reason than spite towards the user. Overwhelming majority of monsters in Dragon Dogma are flesh-based creatures, and sequel seems to follow that trend. You don't need your weapon to weigh half a ton to cut flesh. Largest of beasts in this game can be heard, toppled and killed by a twink with a knife or by involuntarily hardcore acupuncture, so certainly we don't have to upscale already much larger weapons to kill these monsters. There is no logical argument to be made for this bastardization of gallant and graceful weapon, and neither is there any argument to swing around sharpened side armor of T-34's turret, nor to stroll around with a wrecking ball on a stick. But there's even less than zero logical arguments for why the same guy can fling a goblin roughly his size over his head or parry a blow from a fucking ogre and push it flat on his ass, but also struggles to lift his own bloody sword, which he commits both mentioned actions with. Physical strength is not an attribute that fluctuates. If this man has strength to start a goblin space program, he will always have strength to swing that sword without weight of a goblin on opposing end, like if it was nothing. Making character perform feats of extraordinary strength only to present the same character struggling with keeping its weapon off the ground is HEMA equivalent of magazine-fed bullpup revolver. And there is enough of modern science for medieval reenactment, including full combat sports scene, to draw inspiration from, and enough material even on bloody YouTube to get your shit right. The only explanation for Greatsword moveset to look like this is lack of proper research. Of course, I'm not saying Japanese people have to learn European history, I'm saying Dragon's Dogma is clearly Europe-inspired, and I can really feel like expecting just a little bit more from $8 billion company isn't a crime against humanity. That said, I know Bohult isn't a popular sport, and medieval nerds are a subsection of history nerds, which are just that. Nerds. I am aware how isolated my opinion is, and if you see nothing wrong with warrior moveset presented, then I hope you'll have fun playing. There's certainly an audience for big heavy weapon wallop, and everyone has a right to enjoy what they want. I just fester an opinion that nimble gallant weapon should be presented as nimble gallant weapon, and not just regular crude violence utensil. Especially when there already are cool weapons designed to facilitate this very function. On top of that, one sour grape doesn't ruin entire game, and a chance I'll play Dragon's Dogma at least once is mostly affected by my position in relation to poverty line rather than my mild disappointment in Greatsword moveset. If Dragon's Dogma 2 is just as much of an improvement over its predecessor as it seems from the trailers, it will certainly be Elden Ring adjacent smash hit, and I'm nothing but happy for it. All I want is some love and appreciation for Greatswords as they truly are, not as the reduced, downgraded shadow of self they are usually portrayed as. But with that said, have a good one. Crapface out.